On today's FaceTime, here to discuss these three contrasting festivals, I often say, have a happy Qing Ming. No! When you remember your ancestors, it seems to be a very much more respectful way. Mexicans never avoid death, they embrace death.
That is one of the only sure things on life. We celebrate.
You do say happy day.
We say happy day of the dead.
If you said to people, what's Halloween, they don't really understand the religious background to it.
Romanticizing of Western culture.
Why the firecrackers?
That kind of scares off evil spirits.
Right, and English teachers.
There you go.
Welcome to FaceTime. I'm your host, Matt Horn. They say in life there are two certainties, death and taxes. And while tax systems vary around the world, so does the way we look at death. Here in China, we have just marked Qing Ming Festival, a national holiday also known as Tomb Sweeping Day. Across the globe in Mexico, one of the most important dates in the calendar is Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. While Halloween is a growing phenomenon around the world. Here to discuss these three contrasting festivals, I'm very delighted to have two guests. On my left, I have David Najera, the Consul General for Mexico, here in Guangzhou. David, thank you for coming on FaceTime.
Thanks.
David Najera, improving communication between Guangdong and Mexico. And on my right, George McKibbens, cultural preservation expert. George McKibbens, devoted to cultural research and historical preservation. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm sure you've been dying to come on the show.
Absolutely. Yes.
Just to get the theme going off in a nice way. George,
Yes.
introduce Qing Ming Festival for those who don't know much about it.
Well, Qing Ming Festival, it is the second most important festival on the lunar calendar, and it's an annual ritual of ancestral worship. It doesn't always mean necessarily cleaning a tomb. It does mean actually paying homage or caring for the ancestors once a year. And what's most important to know about the mainland is it's only in the last 5 years that it's been recognized as a public holiday. So. In Chinese circles, it's actually manifested differently. It was not recognized in 1950, but overseas Chinese communities have recognized it. And it's only since 2008 that the mainland has recognized it as a public holiday. So you have several generations who didn't necessarily recognize the tradition or maybe knew about the tradition, and now at a national level, the country is sort of re-embracing traditional culture. So it's really an interesting time to live in China, where in this ultra-modern, fast-paced, developing reality, China is starting to become comfortable with its own traditions and its own history.
Well, we'll talk about that history in a minute. Well, just, David, Dia de los Muertos. How did I say that? Okay.
Yes.
Give us a little introduction to that.
You said at the beginning, that is one of the only sure things on life. So this that has been following all the human being, all our history, and we can find representation of that in all kind of cultures. And in the Mexican culture, that has around 3,000 years to be existing as civilization on different cultures, that has been always one of the main references for life. So it marks not only the end of a life, but also the transit to a new time. Could be a newborn, or could be just what's happened to you after life. And the kind of representation of that feeling and that threat even is has been represented in Mexican cultures in many aspects. And maybe Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, is one of the most representative days, and where you have all kind of cultural elements coming together. So you will find element of pre-Hispanic time, and also of course the clash and encounter between these pre-Hispanic cultures and the Western thinking, basically the Christendom.
And what date is it in the calendar?
It's the same days as Halloween, on November 1st and November the 2nd.
Right.
It's 2 days, 2 nights.
It does bring us nicely onto Halloween, the third festival we're looking at. But Halloween today is completely unrecognizable from its origins.
Absolutely,
George?
yeah. Halloween does have a Celtic and British origin from Hallows Eve. When it came over to the U.S., really it became more popular in the American East Coast.
Now, it just
I call
seems
it
to be a big
party,
global party. I mean, have you celebrated Halloween here in China?
Well, it's a commercial holiday, and the best way to compare another commercial holiday is Christmas.
Right.
How many people in China have embraced Christmas but are not particularly Christian or even know that it's got a religious background? I'd say the popularity worldwide of Halloween is a romanticizing of Western culture. And what I'd like to see as we become more connected globally, I'd like to see other cultures be just as prevalent. Not to have, say, an American Western European hegemony. It would be more interesting to see a balance of appreciation of different cultures, which I'd like to see grow.
I mean, David, you've got a young daughter.
Yeah.
Does she celebrate Halloween? What does she do? Does she party with friends?
Yeah, she parties with friends, and but also she helps at home to prepare a memory for our dads, and we cook something special that day, and we have regularly she brings our old dog picture, that's already dead, to have it there.
Yeah.
So she has already bought. Of course, she's looking to have a party with.
Yeah.
So you can see, at least in Mexico, Halloween is also now very popular, especially in urban areas, and it's a party for young people. But the old people, or even those young people, on their intimacy at home, they will keep following a special celebration and commemoration and memory of the dead. So we make a share.
Because it's quite a big contrast, because we've mentioned the word celebrate and party, but you know, when I say goodbye to my students before the Qing festival, I often say, have a happy Qing Ming. No, it's not happy. It's not happy. But I mean, why do they take that attitude?
Qingming is an intimate celebration. You have the Spring Festival holiday, which is where the family gathers together once a year. And Qingmingjie is a reminder to celebrate the ancestors. What are the rituals of Qingmingjie? Offering food to the ancestors, offering paper money to the ancestors. And this is important to understand when you live in China, even if you don't necessarily believe in it, or it might seem weird if you're from another culture. When you learn how to eat with chopsticks, one of the biggest taboos is putting your chopsticks directly into the rice,
so that they're standing up.
That mimics an offering to the ancestors, and oftentimes people know that intuitively in China. And when somebody learns how to eat at a restaurant, say, "Oh, this is great food," a foreigner will stick their chopsticks into the rice, and everyone at the table will go, "No!"
It was one of the first lessons I was taught when I dined here. He says, "Just don't do that." I keep coming back to this word "celebrate" because it's an interesting discussion that I have with my students. Because I'm from the UK, but in Ireland, it's very famous that when someone dies, they have what they call a wake, and it is basically a big party, lots of drink, dancing, singing. To remember, in a positive way, in a happy way. And I always say to my students, well, why don't you, when you remember your ancestors, are you not thinking about all the good times, and are you not thinking about all the happy times? And they say yes, but it seems to be a very much more respectful way, or almost subdued way.
Yes.
David, I've got a quote here from the Nobel Prize-winning writer Octavio Paz, and I'd like to get your take on this. He said about death, he said, "Mexicans never avoid death. They embrace death, kiss death, celebrate death by parties and extravagances. They treat death as a new beginning." Is that something that you would recognize when we talk about Mexicans and death?
Yeah, I would say, of course, when someone close to us die, we suffer and we cry and we miss him or her a lot. That's for sure. But there is another perspective, and you can trace that basically to pre-Hispanic times. Even if you go to Teotihuacan, which is a big archaeological site, close to Mexico City, new discoveries in recent years show a link behind the big sun pyramid and the moon pyramid. And this link, the explanation is that an underground way to transit after death.
Oh, to the next life. Oh,
yeah, so it was totally with religious interpretation. So we can find here some of these elements of the people burning money to help them to transit and help them on that way to another place. So I think the huge part of our first impact with that is what's going to happen to him or to her on that way. And later when you remember them, then you remember them on life. So that's why you make parties, or we celebrate. We say happy day of the
You
dead.
do say happy
We
day
say
of the
happy
dead,
day
yeah.
of the dead because we celebrate that really, and so it's a time to stop and dedicate some moments thinking on him or on her, to cook what he used to like, spend the night there with lights, maybe even all the table with flowers and pictures of him or her and some memorabilia. And the next day, we go to the cemetery. We go and we take flowers, we clean.
And you sweep the tomb.
We sweep the tomb,
Yeah.
yes. So if you go on November 1st or November the 2nd to a cemetery in Mexico, you will find a lot of musical bands, mariachis, or people with a recorder hearing the music he used to sing, he used to like, and so taking a drink with him and eating the meals we prepared the day before.
I mean, and it's clearly got a very ancient history. I mean, just give us a bit of the history of Qing Ming then. How many?
Okay. Well, there's a
years ago?
debate. There's a debate. It's rough. Qingmingjie, it's roughly been agreed upon to be a little more than 2,000 years, or
Right.
either around the Han, Zhou, or Southern Sui dynasty, or around this part of the world. But really, it's just once an annual day
Right.
to take care of the ancestors. Really, the way to understand Qingmingjie, it's an intimate caretaking. In Chinese culture, you cannot depend on external forces. Do not depend on government. Do not depend on a god, if you prefer to think of that way. Depend on the family. The family. Qingmingjie, the definition of Qingmingjie, la familia es todos.
Okay.
So that is the definition
Yeah.
of Qingmingjie. It's about the family. If one thing that's hard for, say, Americans to understand about Chinese culture, why do Chinese kids, when they start working, they immediately give their money to their parents? And why is it that Chinese kids do what their parents tell them to do, whereas Americans, we have this sense of rebellion and independence and learning lessons the hard way? And essentially, Qingmingjie is a reminder that the caretaking of your ancestors, the elders, does not stop in death. You take care of the elders in life and in death. Essentially, the way to understand burning paper money, you're still taking care of your ancestors. Yes, when your parents get too old to work, you support them, and that doesn't stop. It continues.
Because the burning of paper money, obviously we've got
Yeah.
the link with Spring Festival, with the lucky money. There's these things.
That's
all-
essentially
all-
it. Is you still give, just as if they were still here in life, you are still giving them lucky money in death.
But we're now in 2013. And,
That's a great
the,
point.
And the burning of paper money has taken a leap forward. We now
It's a multi-million-dollar industry.
burning of paper iPads,
paraphernalia.
burning of paper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping you can help me with it, because David, like you, I knew nothing about Qingming before I came here, and my first introduction to it was, and I'll never forget, it was in my flat on the Guanwai campus, and I've got Bayan Mountain behind me, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and suddenly I thought the building was under attack. Firecrackers going off, smoke in the air, and I had no idea what was going on. Now, obviously, but why the firecrackers?
Well, firecrackers, that kind of scares off evil spirits.
Right.
And there's a lot regionally.
And English teachers.
There you go. I've actually wanted to use firecrackers on my students.
Yeah.
Prankers, we're both educators at different schools. But when we talk about firecrackers, we can't talk about nationally. China's spiritual traditions differ regionally.
Because it's such a huge country.
Regionally, what's kind of funny is that one of the most fascinating things about China, how is it that all of these people seem to identify, there's a place so big, how do people seem to identify as the same people? China's borders have changed, local languages are so different. Guangdong province has actually got a huge foundation of mixed philosophical and spiritual traditions. Just an hour outside of where we are now, there's Foshan, which is the home of Taoism.
Yeah.
That's its own philosophical thought. And firecrackers, what is interesting to me is that that's a conflict between modern society and traditional culture. Burning paper money, it's not good for the air quality. Letting off firecrackers in an urban setting, it is a hazard, but people will fight to keep their cultures alive.
And there are
and that's all
places-
over the world. People will kind of break the rules to maintain their traditional culture.
We talked about Qing Ming, how it's marked. Whatever. There's some you brought a couple of things with you related to the Dia de los Muertos.
Yeah, yes.
What have we got here, David?
Yeah, let me show you this.
It's beautiful. I mean,
this is.
Let's put it on there.
This and this image too, which is a smiling there.
When you say smiling, I mean that is a happy skull.
Yeah, she's a happy skull, and this is a very famous one, painted at the end of 19th century, and still very very used. Was made by someone called Jose Posada. Identify clearly the idea of certain relation between happiness and death,
right? And
became very very a signature and a clear identity of the relation of death with the Mexicans. And the name of this kind of handcraft is Árbol de la Vida, life tree.
Okay.
Many times it has some biblical representation.
Yeah.
And in the top is Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And then different times of life. But this is different because this is related with death. As I said before, of course, we cry and we suffer a lot when someone that we love dies, but doesn't mean that life doesn't go on. And that's maybe the main message of the Mexican Dia de los Muertos, which is that we keep on, and we have a happy memory of the people that left behind. I just thinking on the firecrackers. Well, there were no firecrackers in Mexico before the Western arrives.
Okay.
But Chinese invention.
Yeah, it was.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And every town has a main church and has a main saint, and many of the small towns are named on the name of a saint. So when the party of that saint arrives, there is a huge party, and all town participates, and always there are a lot of firecrackers, and that repeat again on the Day of the Dead. It's one of the days where the town is allowed to use them, and that was coming maybe from China, because. Think as a piñata that this nice handcraft for Christmas originally came from Filipinas,
right?
And maybe it arrived from here because the trade was from China to Manila in Filipinas, who was administrative part of Mexico in those years. I'm talking about 300 years ago, 400 years ago, and then it moves on Spaniards' ships to Mexico. So. That was the way. Many elements from China origin.
So it's cross-cultural cultivation.
Exactly.
Almost.
They arrive there, like this. I mentioned that the piñata, but also maybe the firecrackers arrive by that way, not necessarily by the other way, because from Western there were weapons. They were not celebrated.
Because you mentioned saints there, and the different towns having saints. I mean that is the kind of the origin of All Hallows Eve. It was ahead of All Saints Day on November the 1st, the same day as the Day of the Dead. But it strikes me that the two festivals that we've talked about in Mexico and China have a real significance. Have a real. I don't think that's completely been lost in Halloween. There is no sense. If you said to people, "What's Halloween?" I think many people wouldn't even know that it relates to. They just think it is ghosts and ghouls, and so they know it's something to do with death, but they don't really understand the religious background to it.
Absolutely not. But yeah, well, that's what happens when a holiday becomes too commercialized without some kind of foundation to understand why we do what we do. What David was just mentioning, what I think is important to explore is that globalization is absolutely not new.
No.
It's just the understanding of trading different cultures has been going on for quite a long time, only now it's just happening faster. And when we live in a city like Guangzhou, which is an international trade city, I think there's so much focus on trading with different countries without stopping to appreciate the different cultures. And I think it's with so many different people coming to Guangzhou to trade, it's really important to stop and start to appreciate and explore, ask questions of each other, recognize these things.
Just to wrap up the show, I'm going to give you both a little test, okay? I'd like you to come up with one word to describe each of the three festivals we've been talking about, okay? So, David, what one word would you use for Halloween?
Funny.
Showtime. Well, it's two words. Show.
We can
performance.
Yep. Sure. Qing Ming.
Qing Ming, care.
Qing Ming.
Memory.
Okay, and I've got to start with you for Mexico. Dia de los Muertos.
Celebration. I would say celebration.
Celebration.
Yeah, celebration. Can I share
I
it
would
with you?
definitely take the, I would definitely take the Mexican's word
Consult
on that
the
one, definitely.
expert. Yeah.
David, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so
very
much
much
for
for coming on,
invitation.
George. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Really enjoyed it. So, that's all for the latest edition of FaceTime. Don't forget you can catch up with all our latest news on our Weibo page. And please feel free to email us with any ideas, comments or suggestion about the show. I've been your host, Matt Horn, with all the latest here in China from GDTV World Headquarters, Guangzhou. See you next time on FaceTime. Bye-bye.